All right, you ready to go on an adventure? Let's flip the page and I'll just read the narrative, okay, the line of Seth. And you'll notice on page 80 that some parts are in green, and I'm going to be talking about them as we get to it. So there's some parts in green on page 80. This is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them man, or Adam. When mankind had lived 130 years, he had a son, in his own likeness, in his own image. Now, we know based on a definite article in front, whether Adam means man or mankind, or whether Adam is a proper name. Okay, so they start, in verse, I think it's verse 2 or 3, he called him Adam, meaning the man or mankind, but then at the starting, when Adam lived 130 years, you can almost tell from the sentence that it's a definite article referring to an individual, as opposed to all mankind. Okay, so there is a difference there based on the article, and all that is in Hebrew is a little apostrophe mark above the Hebrew text. That's all how you know that there's an article in front of it, a definite article. So when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. After he became the father of Kenan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enosh lived 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. After he became the father of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Kenan lived 910 years, and then what happened? And then he died. When Mahalalel lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. After he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalalel lived 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 665 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him away. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech had lived 882 years, he had a son. He named him Noah, and he said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands, caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, now what sticks out? Now that you've gone through it again, what sticks out?
They were old when they begat.
They were old when they begat, yeah.
There are 3 sons of Noah named.
3 sons, yeah. Why do you think?
We're going to hear more about them. And the one, that's the first one.
There's more written later, you know, I mean, the
Those,
flood and
yeah,
after the
Shem,
flood.
Ham, and Japheth. We'll know more about them coming up. Okay. So I'll catch Levita and Glenda up with us, what we asked, well, my main question is, were these people good or bad?
You mean throughout the entire chapter, or?
Yeah. Meaning Seth, well, Seth we know pretty much. Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, and Lamech. Were they good or bad? How can you tell? That's the question. Enoch, everybody kind of assumes is good because, well, he walked with God, it says. That's a good thing. And he was no more, for God took him. It's interesting that we don't know whether that taking was a good or a bad. We assume it was a good.
I guess because they're mentioned, that makes them notable.
Okay.
Notably good or notably bad, I assumed good. But
So the first way we tell is by the actual names themselves. Remember, names are important. Adam means the man, mankind, dust. Okay, Seth, appointed one or gifted one. Remember, he was gifted to Adam and Eve after the loss of Abel, but even Cain and Abel were both lost to them. So Eve had a total change of heart, saying, this is what I've done with Cain. I've created a man, but with Seth, it's a gift from God. God has gifted in me. Enosh means human, mortal, temporal. You kind of get a feeling of what they believe now that they've been cast out of the garden, right? That they're mortal, that they're temporal, that they're temporary.
I got weak or sticky.
Weak or sticky, huh? Okay. Kenan, held close or possessed. Possession. Mahalalel, the praise of God. These names are still sounding pretty good. Jared, descendant of or member of. Interesting name. Enoch, initiated, started, disciplined. That's the second time we ran into Enoch. The line of Cain had an Enoch as well. Methuselah, man of the dirt. Sound good or bad? Quite know yet, huh? Lamech, wild man. Smite, or to make low. Same Lamech name we had in the last line. And then Noah, peaceful, rest, or drifter. It's the name of the small waves on the sea. Notice those small, rolling, drifting waves on the sea. Not the big tidal waves, just the small. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Knowing the future of Noah. Some literary nuances, playing with words. The written account at the very beginning. This is the written account of Adam's line. Written account means, or the name in Hebrew is Sefer, which means the order, or the things to remember. Here's the things to remember about Seth's line. That's basically what it's saying. Here's the things to remember. Now remember, this was an oral culture, right? So we don't know how it was passed down verbally from generation to generation. We assume it was. The first written account is what we have in Scripture here. So and you have to remember that people never read in their minds like we do. Most of our reading, we read inside our head, right? We read something and it's almost like we're saying it inside our head. That was never done in the ancient world. You always read out loud. It was just not heard of. Even when you were studying by yourself, you would read out loud. It was always read out loud, and it was meant to be heard. So, here the person is saying to you, here are the things you need to remember. This is what you need to remember about Adam's line, which is insinuating what they just had before, the other line. Don't worry about that so much, right? Because, again, we're talking about the good line versus the bad line coming. Cain's line is we're especially going to talk about this next week. Cain's line is the bad line, the evil line, whereas Seth's line is the good line from Adam. Okay? When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Interesting. Interesting. And when they were, where did it say blessed? Oh, made them female, male and female, and blessed them. Now you remember the blessing? That's in, I put it there, it's in Genesis 1:26. He blessed them with be fruitful and multiply. Remember that blessing? And fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over every living creature. So that's Genesis 1 verse 26. In Genesis 1 creation story, it says that God blessed them, male and female. He created them both and he blessed them. He said rule over. It's almost as if the intervening narratives have all been forgotten. We jump from Genesis 1 with all these references to made in the image or our own likeness we're going to talk about in the next one. And the blessing, we skipped over the other narratives and now we're almost picking up the story again after the first creation story. Okay? And we're kind of forgetting about Adam and Eve, the fall, Cain and Abel. Those were almost like side stories, and we went from the Genesis 1 creation story right to Genesis 5, because all of these references are referring to the Genesis 1 creation story. He blessed them, and then that last one, his own likeness and image, that comes straight out of the first creation story too, Genesis 1:26. Compared to, what's interesting is the difference. Not only are they the same, but they're different. Remember when I said this is the story of how the earth and the heavens were created, and then next how the heavens and the earth were created. Here we have that switch as well. We have that switch between...
Excuse me, I'm sorry I'm late. Do I stand in the corner?
No.
No, but you're on videotape, so keep your language down. So
Okay. Hi, Mom. Stand
none,
by.
none of this swearing and stuff anymore.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll suck on
Go
the
ahead.
bar, so.
In reading this first paragraph here, one would tend to think that there was another race of human beings. God was not satisfied with those human beings and created Adam to be in his image,
It's
to
like,
counteract, you might say, the other tribe or the other affiliates in this. And then with Cain and Abel and Cain's offspring, that tells the story that there are two different programs here.
yeah, I would totally agree with that. I'm not sure I'd arrange it the same way you did. Because a lot of people talk about the pre-earth age, right? And how Satan fell and corrupted whatever people that... The woman Lilith, if you've heard any of the myths on the woman Lilith, that she was Adam's first wife, and that kind of thing. You can see there's a whole different line going. A lot of people attach that. I believe yes, but again, these stories are, remember, this is not necessarily historical fact as much as it is a message that wants to be told to us.
Right.
Okay, so the message is of these two lines that you're talking about, these two parallel lines going down. And we're going to talk about that a little today as we compare the two genealogies. Last week's genealogy on Cain's line and this week's genealogy on Seth's line. They're different, but they're also the same, that they're running parallel to each other. Now, whether that insinuates God was with or God's image was in this line and not in the other line, that I don't know for sure. But one was corrupted and one was preserved. All right? So you'll notice, again, the second verse, when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God, he created them male and female. And then when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image. Now that's interesting, isn't it? They use the same words, only they're switched. When God created Adam, he made him in his own image, in his own likeness. When God created Adam, image, likeness, when Adam gave birth to Seth, it was likeness, image. It was switched. Okay? So what does that mean if those two are reversed? Likeness means kind, after its own kind, likeness. And whereas image is something different. Image is something different. Image is what we believe is God's breath in you. Okay? God breathed his image. That's something that's special in you that makes you different from the animal kingdom. Okay? So he is emphasizing that. That's something special there. So far, what do we know about this story? What did it mean to them? What then does it mean to us? What did it mean to them and what did it mean to us? So far, we've only scratched the surface of this genealogy. Like I said, my dad used to skip over genealogies all the time, not thinking there was anything important for us kids to know when he read the Bible. Well, first, it's a listen up. This is something important I need you to follow. Okay? This is the written account. This is something you need to memorize. That's the first line. So you know something important's coming. Second, we skipped over the whole Adam and Eve story. We skipped over the fall. We skipped over the whole Cain and Abel story. Genesis 1 is tied directly to Genesis 5. All these references of the written account of blessing them to be fruitful and multiply, and of likeness and image, all comes from chapter 1. And now we're attaching that to chapter 5. So, what we have here is this line. If you wanted to read, according to the Bible, if you wanted to read this in sequential order, you should go Genesis 1 and then Genesis 5, and you get a summary. Okay? So what is it trying to say to us? Well, we still don't quite have it, so flip the page. Let's look at this whole in another way. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing again on page 82. I just put in green most of this stuff for you there. I want you to look at the formula. Okay, I'm on page 83 right now. 83, look at the formula. When blank lived blank, he became father of blank. After he became the father of blank, he lived blank years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether blank lived blank years and then he died. That formula. That's the formula. How many times? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times you got that formula repeated over and over. What is, just looking at the formula, what is it saying?
It's just going by the certain sons or daughters that was born. That meant something to God.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
How many years they lived before they had that son.
Okay. I emphasized part of it too that you should have noticed, and when I read it, I think I emphasized it as well. And then he died.
Then he died, yeah, and then that was it.
Right? It's kind of like, well, what's the point of it all? And then he died.
Mm-hmm.
And then he died. Blank, 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 blank. And then he died. Blank, blank, blank. And then he died. You go, what's going on here? What's the point the author is trying to tell you here now?
Life isn't forever.
Right.
We're mortal.
We're mortal. Okay, we're away from the tree of life. Okay, we're away from the tree of life. We are mortal people. And then he died. It's almost as if, and then he died. We had that joke when I was in, I toured Middle East with a guy who was an archaeologist. And do you know what archaeologists do? They dig, they find stuff, and then they document everything, and then what do? They cover it up. They cover it all back up again. You know what? And so my archaeologist guide is taking us through. He says, oh, that's a mound right there. We dug there and we found this and that's the city of such, and that was during David's time and all this. And then we covered it up. And then he said, this mound over here was blah, 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 and then we covered it up. And then we buried it. And then we buried it. And I'm going, it came to be a joke on our bus as we're going through, because every story he had ended with, and then he buried it. That's the way they preserve it. If you don't have the money to preserve, like a lot of really great mosaics or the stones, if you don't have the money to expose it to the sun and preserve it, you cover it up again. That's how you preserve it. You document everything, and then you cover it up. You bury it. And so we're going, okay, this looks great, but you buried it, you know? And that's what we got here. This is great, all these lives. And then he died. Even Adam. Even Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. So we're already getting a story of mortality here. That there's a story of mortality. We're starting to find out from the names whether these guys are good or bad. Now, we all know the future, right? All of us have read ahead to chapter 7, 6 and 7 as we start picking up the Noah story. We know the future of these guys. But what are we saying so far? And then he died. Notice the ones that are different. Okay? Now, I think I put them in green. First one you all picked out already. Enoch walked with God and then he was no more because God took him away. It's different. We have this formula, something different. And again, if you're hearing this, you know, you hear me going blah, 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 and then he died. Blah, 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 and then he died. Blah, 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 and then he died. Blah, blah, blah. Then he was no more, for God took him. No, wait a minute. It kind of keys into your ear here. Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more. And then what about the other one? Then we get Methuselah, blah, 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 and then he died. And then Lamech, blah, blah, wait a minute. He named him Noah, and said he will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed. After Noah was born, Lamech lived, blah, 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 and then he died. Interesting quote. And notice it's a quote, right? So it was from an older document. When you quote something, that means you've read it somewhere or heard it somewhere, right? It's from an older document, even, in Genesis. And it refers to his name, too, as comfort, you know, the calming waves, as opposed to the chaotic waves. After Noah was 500 years old, and then as, was it Dee or Esther that pointed out, he had 3, we talk about 3 children all of a sudden, instead of just 1. That signifies, when we talk about the ending here, that signifies the end. Okay, and we're going to compare the 2 genealogies in just a minute. So let's look at the numerology. Do you really believe they lived that long?
No.
Yes, I do.
I do.
We don't know how long their year was.
That's true.
The Bible says that, I believe it.
Does the Bible say it?
Well, it said, gives us genealogy with their years when they died.
Does it?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah. You got a problem with that?
That's why we're in Sunday school for.
Not only do names have meanings, numbers have
Yes,
meanings.
they do.
And it does not just mean 930 means 930. Doesn't just mean that. Now, whether it actually means that, we don't know for sure. In fact, we are told that Joseph lived to 110 years old. Okay? We're going to get to that later. Do you know that 110, according to Egyptian, I found it in about 7 different locations in Egyptian writings, 110 is the perfect years of life. That's when you have fulfilled the perfect amount of your life. Imhotep was 110 years when he died. Ramses II was 110 years old when he died. Amenhotep was 110 years old. Joseph was 110. Do you think that's all just a coincidence? Or does it say something? That he reached the perfect amount of years.
I got 40 more years to go.
And then he died. Okay. There's a story about, at one of the classes I've taken on this, I have on CD, which you're welcome to listen to, and that's a guy that introduced me to this book. He had a teacher who was in the Middle East, and he did a lot of archaeology and work in the Middle East. And he had a young kid, a teenager, he thought, that was working with him on the archaeology sites, and he was a great kid. I mean, he was a hard worker, and he just, and so he went to the guy's father, and he said, your son is a fantastic worker. How old is he? You know, your son is a fantastic worker. You must be a great father, you know. How old is he? And he goes, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, you know, you're wise enough to know. And he says, what do you mean? He goes, 20, 30, 40, you should know. And that's how they answer that question. Or they will relate it to a particular period of time. He was born 2 years after blah, blah, blah. 2 years after the British left Egypt.
Flood.
2 years after whatever. Okay? So, just because the ancient Near East writes down 969 for the age of Methuselah doesn't mean he actually lived. Maybe, we don't know for sure. God may have arranged it like that, but what we do know is names have meanings, numbers have meanings. Okay, ages were used to document felt. I'm on 83 again. Ages were used to document felt extremes, not to document actual years. They were meant to say something, and not for accounting purposes. So I just charted these. Adam, 130, 800, 930. Right? 130 when his first kid was born, 800 years lived after that for a total of 930 years. Seth, 105, 807, 912, 90. What do you notice first when you just look at how I have listed those there? What do you notice first about the ages? Other than the ones in green that I marked there. We'll talk about those in a minute.
Some were younger, some were older when they begat.
Do you think that's significant?
I would say yes, but then you look at Noah for 500 and then you got, that goes thrown right out the door.
Yep, yep.
I mean, really.
But there are always exceptions. Remember, we have the formula, and then there's an exception. The exception is to draw your attention, right? It's to make you focus, zoom in on that. Okay? I see everybody's got confused looks on your face. So let me go on, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute. Yeah, I got charts on the next page. That's going to blow you away. Okay? The reason that we're told first how old they were when they had their first child, and then how long they lived after, and then the total, is to say something. Children signified blessing. How many children signified how much blessing. Okay? You'll notice in that formula was when blank lived blank, he became the father of blank. After that, he became the father of blank. He lived blank years and had other sons and daughters, had other blessings. Okay? So children signified blessing. So what you have to do is take 130, the first number, and multiply it or divide it into total lifespan, and what you will have is how many kids. Okay? It's still confusing. I'm going to show you a chart in just a minute. That'll
Multiply it total years.
divide it. Divide 930 total years by when they had their first child. So without looking at the chart, who was the most blessed?
I would say Messiah.
Mahalalel. Jared, Mahalalel, probably the most. Flip the page a minute. I just happened to put it on a spreadsheet, charted it for you. So here's the age of the first child. Notice that from Adam down to Mahalalel, they get younger when they have the first child. And then Enoch blows it out of the water, okay? So ignore Enoch, because that's the exception that makes the rule. But then look what happens to after Mahalalel. Jared goes way up. Ignore Enoch, Methuselah way up, and even Lamech way up. So suddenly, there's less blessing. Years for childbearing, it's the next chart down. You can just see it's going down and down and down. Age at death, not as significant as it goes down, and again, Methuselah being the oldest. But look at the number of kids then. What that is dividing the age of the first child by dividing their age by the age of the first child. And there's a very distinct pattern there. There was more and more and more blessing right up to Mahalalel. And then all of a sudden, again, ignore Enoch, because Enoch throws the whole chart off. See that big spike on Enoch there? But if you follow after Mahalalel, Jared, Methuselah, and Lamech are very unblessed.
Back to regular families.
Goes back to almost the same as the other line, the Cain line. And again, we know the next chapter, right? Chapter 6 is when the world was so bad that he had to save Noah out of it, and we start the flood story. So not only did Cain's line go bad, but now we see how Seth's line was going up and up and up, and then it started going down again. Again, ignoring Enoch. Enoch is the exception.
Where do we know that all these listed are the firstborn, first child?
Because they put it in there. They wouldn't have put anything else in there.
Okay, versus just a key person in the line.
And again, that may not have been the name of the firstborn, because these numbers are trying to say something to you. They want to tell you what the name of that child is. That tells you how it is blessed. Look at the names, and then look at the ages, and you will know whether that person is a good person or a bad person. Mahalalel was the peak. If you look at his name means praise of God. And then right after that, we have just descendant, or Lamech, smiter, wild, crazy person. Okay? Suddenly it peaks at Mahalalel, and then it starts coming down. Again, ignore Enoch. Enoch is the exception. The exception that makes the rule. And we're going to talk about him in just a minute. All right, back up again to page 83 after you've digested those charts. So numbers are significant. Just because the Bible says a number doesn't mean that it means that number. So there's something behind it. There's something deeper in it. Look at Enoch. Why is this number significant? How long did Enoch live?
365.
Where have you heard that number before?
Yeah.
365
days
days
a
a
year?
year.
Huh. Do you think that's significant or just a coincidence? Nothing in the Bible is a coincidence. Okay? There's significance to it. They knew the days of the year. Again, if you picture them coming out of Egypt, Egypt knew 365 days. What Egypt had was 360 days. They had 12 30-day months, and then they had 5 days of party. Okay? They knew 365 days. They knew it. You know, they had the technology then. So it's very significant that Enoch, what do you think it means that he lived 365? What do you think it means? What's the significance behind it?
Live a full life.
He
Full life.
he found favor with God.
Yeah, he found favor. It was the perfect life. Okay, a lot of different insinuations. We don't know for sure. Okay, 10 is a very significant number. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. 7 is a very significant number. Look at 777 for Lamech. Compared to Lamech in chapter 4. What did Lamech say in the other Lamech in the line of Cain say in chapter 4? If Cain will be avenged 7 times, I will avenge 70 times 7. Jesus refers to that, right? Should I forgive 7 times? And Jesus says no, 70 times. So do you think he really meant 490 or whatever it adds up to be? No. It's a number of keep on doing it. It's a number of perfection. 7 is the number of spiritual perfection. You keep on doing it.
Ongoing.
Keep on going. Keep on forgiving. I will keep on killing, says the one Lamech. Okay, and here you have another Lamech. That's 777. At first it draws your attention back to the previous Lamech you heard in the other chapter. Okay, but second it talks about his sin has become what? His spiritual sin. It's also a negative. You know, his spiritual sin has been perfected. The sin of the Seth line now is complete. Right? Because the next one is Noah, and that's when God's going to pull Noah out of there. So the sin of the line of Seth is now complete. 777. Read that right underneath the chart there. Generally, the younger age of having children meant a quicker blessing from God. Blessed with early kids, Seth. Seth is the marker. Okay, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, and Enoch. Cursed with delayed son, Jared, Methuselah, and Lamech. Noah, of course, breaks the mold. We're going to talk about Noah in a minute. Generally, the middle number represents how fruitful they were. Middle number divided by the first number. Generally, the number 10 is a number of human perfection. Human perfection. What is significant about the number of 10 that you would find in the Bible? Ten Commands?
Yeah.
10 plagues? A lot of tens in the Bible. That's where you have 7 is spiritual perfection. Number 10 is human perfection. 10. You see that a lot. So what you have is 10 times 10 times 10. Generally, the age of the person is with respect to a perfect millennium. 10 times 10 times 10 equals 1,000, right? 10 times 10. So did any of them reach human perfection? 1,000. None of them did. Except, significant that Noah didn't have any kids until 500. Half perfection. Or he is on his way, is what they're saying. Also may signify, that should be, also may signify that his life will be split and changed, i.e. pre-flood and post-flood, or after flood. Okay, so the fact that Noah was 500 when he had kids, probably not. But that number is significant. It means that he was on his way to perfection. It means that he was different and distinct from the rest of that evil generation, the 777 generation. All right, you see how much you can pull out of these genealogies once you start digging in. So now we know which ones were good, which ones are bad. Now we know why, a little bit more about Enoch, we know a little bit more about Noah. So let's look at the genealogies in comparison, page 85. Let's compare the two genealogies. Okay, the line of 7. 7 is the number of spiritual perfection, but on this side it's evil perfection. So if you count from Adam to Lamech, Lamech is in yellow there. He's the significant one. And then they close it. You close the genealogy by saying, okay, and now I'm going to give you the people we know. Okay, so this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one, and now I'm going to close it with the people we know. Both of those, you'll notice, all of a sudden, in the last one, we hear about their children. In Lamech's, we hear about his 2 wives, Ada and Zillah, his sons Jubal and Jabal, and Tubal-Cain, and his daughter Naamah. And then all of a sudden with Noah, we hear none of the other kids except for now Noah, we have Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So that's signifying we're closing, we're cutting off that genealogy. What it also probably signifies is these are the names we know. These are the names we know the line of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. In fact, you heard of the Semites in the Middle East? Semites? Shemites. They're from the line of Shem.
Really?
Okay? That's Shemites and Semites are the same word. Okay? So, the line of Shem. That's when we start. It's almost like this genealogy is connecting you from the ancient times to the historical times. We know these people. Okay, we know Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or at least somebody's grandfather's grandfather's grandfather. We know Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Before that, we're going to use the names to signify something. In the line of Cain, we're going to use it to signify how bad the world was getting. In the line of Seth, we're going to signify there is a different line. It was getting good and good and good up to Mahalalel. And then all of a sudden, it started going bad with Lamech again. And Enoch, of course, was the bad one. Jared was starting to head downhill. Enoch is the extra. Methuselah and Lamech. So Methuselah is a good or a bad person, according to this genealogy.
talented.
But he was old before his first kid.
He was on the downward slide. Methuselah was on the downward slide, so
He was pretty low.
he was getting down there. Okay, so really, the line of Seth peaked at Mahalalel. We know that by their names, and we know that by the numbers attached to them. Okay, Enoch is the exception, and then of course Noah is the ending. That's where perfection comes back again. It's almost, in fact, we're going to have another creation story with Noah. Okay. So on the one line you have 7, which is spiritual perfection, or spiritual imperfection in this case. And the other line we go all the way down to 10. And that means human perfection, or human fulfillment. The similarity in names is thought significant by some, but more significance is in the meaning of those names, showing the depravity progression of man. Shows the progression of our depravity from Adam down to Noah. On both lines. On both lines. Okay? Genealogies can tell you a lot. Some of you, I think, are still a little skeptical that you can pull that much out of it. Remember, again, names are significant and numbers are significant in the Bible. It's not just thrown in there by coincidence. They're very significant. That's when you start to understand the richness of Scripture. You can dig below the surface of this. I just had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him away. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he had a son. He named him Noah, and he said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands, caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years, and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, now what sticks out? Now that you've gone through it again, what sticks out?
They were old when they.
All right, you ready to go on an adventure? Let's flip the page, and I'll just read the narrative. Okay, the line of Seth. And you'll notice on page 80 that some parts are in green, and I'm going to be talking about them as we get to it. So there's some parts in green on page 80. This is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them man, or Adam. When mankind had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image. Now, we know based on a definite article in front, whether Adam means man or mankind, or whether Adam is a proper name. Okay, so they start, in verse, I think it's verse 2 or 3, he called him Adam.
Yeah.
They were old when they begat. Yeah.
There are 3 sons of Noah named.
3 sons, yeah. Why do you think?
We're gonna hear more about them. And the one, that's the first one.
There's more written later, you know, I mean, the
Those,
flood and
yeah,
after the
Shem,
flood.
Ham, and Japheth. We'll know more about them coming up. Okay. So I'll catch Levita and Glenda up with us. What we asked, well, my main question is, were these people good or bad?
You mean throughout the entire chapter, or?
Yeah. Meaning Seth, well, Seth we know pretty much. Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, and Lamech. Were they good or bad? How can you tell? That's the question. Enoch, everybody kind of assumed, meaning the man or mankind. But then at the starting, when Adam lived 130 years, you can almost tell from the sentence that it's a definite article referring to an individual as opposed to all mankind. Okay, so there is a difference there based on the article, and all that is in Hebrew is a little apostrophe mark above the Hebrew text. That's all. How you know that there's an article in front of it, a definite article. So when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived 930 years, and then he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. After he became the father of Kenan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enosh lived 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. After he became the father of Mahalalel, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Kenan lived 910 years, and then what happened? And then he died. When Mahalalel lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. After he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalalel lived 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 162 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 665 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years.